good morning and welcome to the PTEOE live stream webinar, Spotlight on Production. Thank you for joining us. I want to take just a moment to recognize our captioner, Gabrielle Berjou, who is providing the captioning, and ASL interpreters, Courtney Nimmershem and Sharon Pierre-Louis. Our interpreters will be translating today's program into American Sign Language. They'll be switching off periodically throughout the discussion. The presentation, Spotlight on Production, Insider Tips from Industry Pros, will begin momentarily. If you have questions at any time during today's webinar that you'd like to direct to our guests, please email pteoe@sagaftra.org. That's pteoe@sagaftra.org, and we'll get to as many as we can in the time that we have. As a reminder, today's program is being recorded and you can watch the replay right here on SAG-AFTRA's YouTube channel, along with more great content. Now, please give a warm welcome to today's host, SAG-AFTRA President, Gabrielle Carteris.
Thank you, Pam. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I hope that you're all doing well and staying safe. Oh, yes, we will get through this time. Anyway, before we kick off, I just want to give a quick welcome to our Executive Vice President, Rebecca Damon. Thank you for being here, Rebecca. It's great. Rebecca actually helped to put this panel together. We appreciate that. You know, so many of us as SAG-AFTRA members, we work around the country, right? In fact, we're working around the globe. Our jobs are actually taking us everywhere and anywhere. I'd like to call it a movable feast. So today we're going to hear from leading industry professionals who dig into the ever-changing production market in Atlanta, Georgia. Because production, as we all know, is booming in Atlanta, and our panel is going to share some of the insights on what's it like working there in that market. Through today's discussion, we're going to focus on what's happening. Just as an example, getting one example of an active production market in our country, that's what this is today. Even though we're talking about Atlanta, we're actually using it as an example, and we're going to be looking at others in future panels. Through today's discussion, we're going to also gain some insight into some of the lessons learned by professionals in the market. And we will also get a sense of what casting directors are looking for when they're identifying talent to work on projects there. Last month, actually, this is a really interesting fact. AJC reported that the state of Georgia currently has 29 shows listed in active production. That's 29 shows that are in active production, and so many more are returning, not only there, but I hope around the country. We all have been hearing about Tyler Perry, how the news of late has been that he's had some really great success with the quarantine filming of a number of shows from his 330-acre campus. He certainly seems to be successfully leading the way with film and television production during COVID. And, you know, we have just recently released the Safe Way Forward Back to Work. So this will be interesting to hear from the people in Atlanta, our members, and the people who work in the industry to how is that working for them. So there's a lot that we're going to get from today's discussion. I'm happy, though, before we get into that discussion, to present today's moderator, Atlanta Local President, Clayton Landey. He's also, actually, I love that the fact that he's doing this. He's always wanted to be able to reach out. So thank you, Clayton, for really being here today. He's very accomplished. He's an award-winning performer after 40 plays, 40 films, 180 TV episodes, 85 commercials. Clayton stopped counting, and so we will as well. He's been a professional performer, mime, actor, director, producer, writer, and teacher for over 45 years. He also teaches scene study for the working actor at the Alliance Theater, and get the out of your head. I can't say that word here, but you know what that means. And the Rob Mello Studio, and so much more. Thank you so much for being here, Clayton. And why don't you take it away?
It's my very great pleasure, President Carteris. Thank you so very much. We're very grateful to have this opportunity to present a program from our conservatory here in Atlanta, the Muriel Moore Danny Nelson SAG-AFTRA Conservatory. And all of our panelists today have given of themselves greatly to our conservatory and have truly supported our union members here in Georgia. And we're very grateful to have them with us here today. Let me first introduce Rhavynn Drummer. She's an award-winning producer, director, casting director. Rhavynn began her career in casting at Tyler Perry's studios, and we'll talk about that. in 2007 after graduating from the University of Virginia. She's had the honor of casting over 15 television series, 18 feature films, and 7 touring plays with the studio, and has also worked on numerous independent projects with Nickelodeon, Stars, Nike, and YouTube Red. She's her first web series, Good Girls, which she wrote, directed, and produced, went on to win the Best Web Series at the Bronze Lens Film Festival and the Black Women Film and TV Festival. She also co-created and directed Brooklyn Blue Sky, which became the first acquired web series for BET. And after winning the Xfinity Best Web Series Award at the American Black Film Festival. She's also an adjunct professor in Theater and Communication Studies Department at Clark Atlanta University. Next we have, well, now Mark is on the left side of my screen, Mark Fincannon, casting director and owner of Fincannon and Associates. They've cast literally hundreds of features, limited series, episodic, and television movies of the week. They've won multiple Emmy Awards, Artios Awards, and other acknowledgements for their work. The company just celebrated 40 years of casting and has offices not just here in Fayetteville, Georgia, but Wilmington, North Carolina, New Orleans, Louisiana, Austin, Texas. And Mark has cast many films, including Blindside, Miracles from Heaven, Glory Road, and he's owner of Luminarium Pictures, a motion picture production company striving to tell stories of the highest caliber and quality and inspirational content. George Pierre, casting director George Pierre. Hey, George, head up. Since opening their doors in 2007, Pierre Casting has had the pleasure of casting for CNN, TBS, BET, Disney, TV One, Fox, NBC Universal, and most recently, the OWN Network. Pierre Casting's worked on feature films such as No Good Deed, which was 2 straight weeks at #1 in the box office, Ride Along 1 and 2, Amaya's Christmas, Night School Little, TV shows such as Being Mary Jane, The Quad, Superstition, and most recently, Lee Daniels' Star, along with Ambitions, American Soul, and Tales. And we have Ric Reitz. Ric is an actor, writer, composer, director, and producer who's been active in show business for over 40 years. He's appeared in over 150 television shows, feature films, stage productions, served as SAG-AFTRA Atlanta Local President. Thank you, Ric. Past president of the Georgia Production Partnership, a former member of the Georgia Film, Video, and Music Advisory Commission, and I think most importantly to us here in Atlanta, he's one of the key architects in the development of Georgia's current entertainment tax incentive law. Ric's played an important role in the resurgence of production here in our state. So I want to start with Ric. I want to start with some context. We know that Georgia has the full gamut of locations, from oceans and beach to mountains, canyons, rivers, everything in between. And Atlanta's sub for metro locations around the world. Ric, as one of the chief architects of the Georgia Entertainment Tax Incentives, please frame for us. Tell us how we got from being a small local to one of the top 3 production centers in the world.
Well, I like to describe it as the perfect storm. In the late 1990s and into the earliest part of the millennium, we started to see a lot of United States work going off to Canada, New Zealand, Australia. And everybody was pretty perplexed about where it had gone, why it had gone. Well, it all becomes about the bottom line and money. And so invariably, we had to figure out a way to become competitive. From 1985 to 1995, few people realized that Georgia actually had a pretty robust television and film industry. We'll call that pre-tax credit. And then we sort of fell like the rest of the United States from 1995 to 2005 at least, where we lost a lot of the traction to international concerns, but largely because they became competitive with tax credits, and partly because international currency exchange put them at an advantage to lure productions to their sites. So to level the field, states like New Mexico, Louisiana, and ultimately Georgia, but many states now including New York and so many more, there were at last count 43 states with tax incentive programs that were active. And we jumped on board with a package to try to remain competitive. And over a short period of time, between 2005 and 2008, we were able to perfect our package to what it stands today, which is that 30% off their bottom line in qualified expenses. Not every dollar goes to the expenses, but what we took is a very nascent film industry that had been booming from time to time, right up to and including the Olympics in 1996. And we had all this great technical talent, acting talent, and much, much more infrastructure. So when I say the perfect storm, we were able to enter the marketplace not starting from ground zero. A lot of our people had left the state and gone to other states to work, but we were able to lure them back once we became far more competitive. As a result, in 2007, as an example, the entire state of Georgia had $240 million of gross production work. That's all aspects of production per annum. In less than 10 years' time, that grew to $3 billion a year per annum as a result of the credits. Now, it wasn't solely the credits, but many of the things that attract people here, of course, the bottom line, but the indigenous nature of the state of Georgia shows us from Golden Coast to the mountains, to rural plains, to cities and the like, is we have this broad diversity of topography, which makes us unique, and it also allows us to double for other locations. So that, in combination with some of our pre-existing infrastructure, the money aspect, and the talent growing, we were able to move into this very comfortable space that was left empty for a long time. And now more and more states are becoming competitive on an equal plane, but we've been able to hold our own. We're very proud of that. And while I was lucky enough to be part of the original team that put it all together, I'm here to tell you, we could not have done it without what I consider the largest grassroots elements in the United States when we were putting this together. So 1 becomes 10, becomes 1,000, becomes 10,000. And ultimately, we were representing through a group called the Georgia Production Partnership as many as 15,000 individuals and companies that were in the business. And just to show you the robust growth, we probably had in Georgia for SAG and AFTRA memberships back then prior to merger, about 600 to 700 total members. We are in excess now of 2,500 members, SAG-AFTRA combined, because of course we consolidated in 2013.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rick. Mark, let me jump to you. We mentioned the size of the union. We're now over 2,500 members here in the local. Now, I know when you were in Wilmington, you were among the first, you may have been the very first to use taped auditions on a regular basis because of the distance, because there was such a group of actors here in Atlanta that were going back and forth to Wilmington. Now here we are in a market that's dictated by COVID. Almost exclusively, we're using taped auditions and Zoom auditions. So how have you seen this casting process change over the years, and how's it affected what you're doing now and what you're asking from actors now? Mute. Thank you.
So good question, Clayton. Thank you. I started so long ago that we didn't even know what a video camera was. I think it's important that your actors understand kind of how we even moved from live auditions to taped auditions. That really happened in 2008 when the stock market fell and gas was $4.25 a gallon. We had done a television series called Dawson's Creek for 6 years and One Tree Hill for 9 years. And we were in the 7th year, I think, of One Tree Hill, when all of a sudden the actors that would normally drive from Atlanta to Wilmington for a live audition every 7 or 8 days for episodic television simply said, we can't afford to come. It was going to cost $100 literally in an entire day. So we had a real problem. We still had a show to cast. And every 7 days we're getting another script, and we need actors for that show. And we'd used every actor in the Wilmington area many seasons before. So we were dependent upon actors from DC and Atlanta and Orlando and Nashville and Charlotte and Columbia and Charleston. And, we've always had to live from a 500-mile radius in our heads, because if you live within 500 miles, you could conceivably drive over in an early morning, do a midday audition and drive back. And, the actors today don't even have any real understanding of what actors in the 80s and 90s went through to get these jobs And we wouldn't have our job if they didn't work as hard as they did and sacrifice the way they did. But ultimately, because of the problem in 2008, by then we were using VHS cameras. And so we simply called the agent and said, do you think you could get your actor to come by the agency? We'll send you over the sides. And if you guys could do it in your agency, and then just ship a VHS tape overnight to us, and we'll show it to our director. And if it's a larger role and they really want to work with the actor, then they can get in their car and drive the 7 hours, at least knowing that the producing team or the director have seen their work and knows that it's worth the drive. And then the actors would get in. But many times actors would drive all those many hours, and you're always up against 5 to 10 other actors, and the percentages were just really low. So anyway, that's really what started the taping process. And then we went from VHS to mini DV to little DVDs, and then now we have streaming. So we've been at this since, I guess, 2008. We've been at this for 12 years, having actors figure out. There's nothing about it that I like, because prior to 2008, for 30 years, I read every single actor I ever sent to the set personally, in the room with the director with me. So to now have that distance was very challenging. So we began to really travel to the agencies, sit down with them, talk to them about ways to bring a professional actor into the room, make sure the lighting is excellent, make sure the sound is excellent, but ultimately, I remember early on walking down with my first iPhone. Spielberg was shooting on the lot in Wilmington, North Carolina, and walking down to the stage and handing him the phone and the iPhone. He watched an audition like in 2010 and cast the actor from that cell phone. And it was at that moment I realized, wow, the world truly is changing. So in many ways, to answer your question more specifically, I think in some ways we were ahead of the game with what is happening now with COVID, because many of the actors in this market, and this is happening all over the world, because people can tape in London and send it to Los Angeles in 15 minutes instead of having to work out the details of flying an actor from London to LA or whatever. So taping is becoming more normal than ever. And so with that, the newer challenges, and actors could speak to it better than I can, but the newer challenges is, how can I get a really authentic, honest performance inside that little box so that you can be comfortable that when I show up on the day, I'm going to be able to deliver not just what you see here, but give you layers and a range and that kind of thing. And it certainly has been challenging to do that, Clayton.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's great context. George, you've used both, as long as I've known you, you've been doing both live and tape. Now that we've moved strictly to tape, yes, please unmute. Thank you. What's changed for you? What are you asking of actors now that you didn't before?
Well, we still hold to the same standards as if when we're bringing them into the room, because at the end of the day, if you're submitting a self-tape, and it has to be as good as if you're actually auditioning in the room. So we hold that to high standards. But I think that some of the good things that are coming out of this is that you can see more actors, obviously. Some of the bad things that are happening is that everybody, when this whole wave of this whole self-tape, I'm going to self-tape, I think people were taking advantage of it. And some people were kind of maybe afraid to come in the room. But we want to see the people in the room. And I think one of the things that are being utilized now, I think Breakdown Express, which we've used, has this system where, kind of like the Zoom, what we're doing right now, and you have the actors come into the room, but they're at their location, wherever they're at. And I think that still keeps us a little bit more intimate. The only thing that kind of takes away from it is, if you don't have good internet, you're going to have a problem.
But you're still able now to direct an actor to give a feedback to an audition and move them forward, right?
Correct. And that's because Breakdown Express has come up with this new system, and I'm sure Mark and Rhavynn are aware of that, should have used it, is that where we'll schedule you, just like how we usually did before. We'll schedule you and then we'll have you in a waiting room, kind of like this whole Zoom thing. Then we'll bring you in, we'll audition you. We either keep the take or we don't keep the take. Same process, it's just that we're doing it virtually right now. And I think it's a fair thing because there are plenty of actors, yourself, Rick included, who want to be in the room, and it helps us. Because here's the thing, I'm a little afraid if there's a lot of dialogue to it, and I'm just going by a self-tape and be like, oh, okay, that may have been 100 takes that you have done, and I'm a little skeptical on that. So for the actors that I know can bring it, you know, I trust them. But for the people that, you know, we're seeing new people, I want to be able to give you some direction. I want to be able to say, hey, okay, all right, just bring it down a little bit. Let's try it this way, just to see if you can take it there. But for certain roles, I refuse to just go off a self-tape. It's very important that you don't do that. But I do love the fact that we're giving the actors the opportunity to still, quote unquote, be in the room.
So you can do that follow up. Great. That's great.
Yeah. And you can even invite the producers to do it as well, which is great. But I think sometimes, especially when you're working on a TV show, the producers don't have the luxury and, you know, to go back and forth. So, you know, being that we're still able to see the actors personally, it helps tremendously.
Thank you, George. Rhavynn, not only have you done all these different modes, because you've been here for a while and you've done the different modes of casting, but you've also had to develop a different set of casting muscles, if you will, because you work with Tyler Perry. And Mr. Perry often shoots scenes by location, not by story arc. You're moving faster, you're moving out of sync. What have you learned from that that's going to move actors forward during this situation we're going through now?
Yes, you know, especially in COVID, it's definitely been a very interesting experience. You know, especially in the beginning, we didn't have everything was self-tape. We didn't have any opportunity to do anything live audition. But when it comes to how we work specifically, I kind of use the same principle. I feel like I was Fincannon's assistant when I first started at Tyler Perry Studios. Yes, back in 2007, and he would always say, cast above the role. And what he meant is like, we're casting actors that are capable of doing more than what we're necessarily auditioning them. So like if you have a under 5, we're really casting the actor that can do 2 full 3 scenes. And so I've begun to apply those principles when it comes to the work that we do, because like, as you say, Clayton, we don't have the luxury of multiple takes, of rehearsals, of table reads. It's really, we have to find an actor that's not going to be intimidated by our pace. And it's a lot, like it's a lot to ask of an actor to come in, to start with your 3rd episode and then go to the 2nd one. And, you know, and you're meeting all these actors and we're all going to do it in one day. You know, it's definitely a lot, but I tend to find that I really have to rely on the resume. I really have to rely on training. I really have to rely on actors that I feel can kind of jump in to a very unorthodox way of filming and not be intimidated by that pace, and especially in the midst of COVID, for sure.
Speaking of COVID, while I'm talking to you, let me ask, you've led the way. Tyler Perry Studios was the first one out the door. You changed the way the industry works.
Yes.
Can you address that a little bit? Tell people what's going on and how that's working, and what can we learn from that moving forward?
Yes, I'm incredibly proud of everything that we've been doing, of the way that we've been filming, of the testing, of the experiences that the actors have had. So just so you guys, my particular office, the casting office, we've been working from home, but our actors are a part of our, I guess we can call it like our camp quarantine, so because we work quickly, we're able to film a lot of episodes very fast. And basically our actors quarantine or stay on the premises throughout until they're finished filming. But let's see, they may be on the premises for a 2-week span where they're getting tested, they're getting food, they're getting treated very well, and then making sure everything is safe. They do their work, and then as soon as they wrap, they're able to leave the premises. It's been a phenomenal experience. It's definitely been a big adjustment casting wise, you know, making
What's
sure-
changed? What's changed casting wise? This is important for us.
Yes, yes. I think one of the biggest things that's changed is one, there's no self-tapes. Two, I am very, very, very conscious of the people that I send in my top choices, because the truth is, if there is something that's not working, you know, as we all know, you get a self-tape and then sometimes what you get is a little different. Because we're in quarantine, we can't make an adjustment. We can't change the actor.
So what are you doing? What are you doing instead of self-tapes?
Well, for right now, we've stuck to self-tapes. Occasionally, if it's a larger role, then we'll do one of the live auditions, like a live Zoom. But for right now, it's 95% self-tapes for us. So the self-tape is very, very, very important for us. And then also finding actors who are compliant and comfortable with our safety plan. It's very specific. It's very detailed. We are very focused on keeping our sets, our actors, our crew safe. So also just making sure that agents and actors are understand and are comfortable with our safety plan as well.
Now that we brought up self-tapes, let me ask the three of you quickly, because I don't want to do too deep a dive into technology, but what is it? Because every casting director here seems to have different requirements of their self-tapes. And very often the requirements that I get from the West Coast are much lower than the standards that we're showing here in Atlanta. We seem to be asking more of our actors. Give me the top three for each of you. What's the top three musts for a good self-tape?
How about know your lines, number one, but I'll let everybody else wait.
Okay. But that's good, because in the room on the West Coast, you're encouraged to have paper in your hand. But when you do a self-tape, we don't want to see that, right? We want to see.
Well, here's the deal. Again, you want to treat a self-tape as if you're in the room. I'm sure everybody here, when you go in the room, you see the lights, you see the camera, everything is professional. What I don't want to see is, you know, the countdown for somebody who's recording you. Is the camera straight? So that's why we hold high regard. We hold high standards. We have to set that. So many times I'll get a self-tape and the person is adjusting the camera and their reader is just, dear God, can't read. And it's just, you have to have the same standards as if you're in the room. So for the actors who unfortunately never had that opportunity to get in the room, it makes it very difficult for them, because they still won't know. Does that make sense? Because they have to follow that guideline. They have to, when you get in that room, some of my peeves are just kind of like when somebody just totally unprepared, and the agent didn't look at the tape to make sure that before the person uploaded, that it was good content, that there was actually content on it. I've gotten blank tapes. So I'm like, did you not go back and look at this? So I think it surpasses more than three, but it's ridiculous.
Clayton's sound would be crucially important, the sound of the actor's voice and not necessarily the reader's voice. Mm-hmm. There ought to be an 80-20, difference probably in terms of volume. Most filmmakers are really looking into the soul through the eyes of the actor. So generally we like fairly tight close-ups. It's nice to get a full shot because you do need to know who you're hiring as a full person. But when they're actually doing the moments and entering into these moments, we want to see what's happening inside and behind their eyes, I'm not sure, what it's. I think every actor's goal should be to do everything you can without props and costuming and all that, but to create the moment that's going to live and breathe when you go to the set. Because the producer and director, if they see that happening in your audition, then, when they see that that's what they're looking for, they don't have to look any further. And believe me, your competition out there, if you could see the competition that we see, the ones who actually get the jobs, they're pros. You would have thought they've been in this moment 1,000 times before. And it's just as incarnately real and simple. And it's like you're there and living and breathing in that moment. And if you can't find that, then you're probably not, you know, in the top 10.
I've had Rick send me a few tapes a couple times, to the point where I realized I had to upgrade my camera system. Okay, because the lighting was Rhavynn, Mark, you guys could like the lighting is just sexy. The audio is, it's just everything about it just looks great. And Clayton is that. So my thing is like when you want that, you want the producer and the network, the studio, the powers that be to look at it and be like, that's what I want on my camera.
Yeah,
you know, like you went, oh, like you created the scene. I feel it. There's no props involved. You're acting, you're doing what it is that you need to do, and you're bringing that character to life.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Rhavynn?
I would say just lighting, sound, making sure you have a reader that doesn't upstage you. I've gotten a ton of auditions where I'm like, who is that reading? And now I'm focusing on the reader and not your performance. And then also lately, I feel like this is maybe since COVID, I've been getting a lot of people sending me the wrong takes. Like I've been getting a lot of like, oh wait, I did that wrong. Can we do that back? And I'm like, I'm sure they didn't mean to send this particular take to me if there was some sort of mistake. So just make sure that you've watched it again, or you've watched if you submitted, to make sure you send and label the correct take when you send it, for sure.
Wow, thanks. I want to go back to COVID before I jump to questions from members who sent in. Rick, you've been on a set a couple of times since we've been we've returned to work. Compare what's going on and tell us. I mean, we've had 3 different sets of guidelines here in Atlanta. We had our governor's protocols, and I won't go there. We had the original Safe Way Forward, and now Return to Work. What's working for us, and what's changed? President Carteris earlier said 29. I think we're up to like 35 productions now, which puts us at about 75 of 80% of where we normally are. You want to talk to that for a moment?
Well, right. Keep in mind that Georgia's fiscal year runs July 1 through June 30. And so we judge our progress not on a calendar basis, but on a fiscal basis. And this market was entirely shut down for the second quarter of this year, which would have been the 4th quarter of the fiscal year. And so we really did lose 25% of the marketplace that quickly. Now we're in the first quarter of the next year. And we're, to be honest with you, Tyler Perry Studios was the first out of the gate to really do something of significance. And they were really smart, not only because they acquired the property that they acquired, but Mr. Perry has always been ahead of the curve. And to that regard, he ended up taking over, for those who don't know it, who are watching nationally, ended up taking over Fort McPherson once it became available out of the federal government. And so he actually has a walled property. Rhavynn can tell you how many acres and how many other facilities and things they have. But let me tell you what, it's a significant former Army base, and they flipped it and made it contemporary in every way. And they were really first out of the box to come up with lots of different protocol. Well, we were trying to figure it out within the industry. They were busy doing it because they were on a schedule that they wanted to shoot by I'm pretty certain mid-July. And basically they were the first to bring everyone into the encampment, quarantine them in advance, test them many, many times well in advance. They became a bubble. And within that bubble, they had a full and happy life, but they couldn't leave the bubble. So now we projected into other things. I know I just worked for Mark just recently on a Christian show called Southern Gospel. And even though their budgetary structure was not that which Tyler might have been working with, they were right on top of it. I had to be tested within 72 hours of going to wardrobe. Since I was not going to be quarantined in a bubble, you know, there's a certain amount of autonomy you still have to have when you don't have the money. And so I had, just to go to wardrobe, I had to test. After wardrobe, I was tested again because I was within 72 hours of going to set. Weather changed the shoot day. I was tested a 3rd time because we ended up switching from a Friday shoot to a Monday because of the rain. So within a 7-day structure, I was tested, well, 8 days if you count the following Monday, I was tested 3 different times. I arrived on set, everybody had a mask, I had a mask. Most of the PAs and people that I had to interface with from the DGA, the AD department, wearing gloves, wearing masks, many of them wearing shields. I was quickly led to my trailer, and essentially you are more or less sent to the trailer, your private little quarantine. Wardrobe comes to you, stays out of the trailer. They don't even come in. They sterilize the clothing in front of me. When I got dressed and they approved the wardrobe, I stepped out, sound came in, everybody's wearing a shield. They gave me a shield, you've seen them, rather than top down, it goes around your neck and comes upward. So underneath it's a face mask and then a plastic shield.
Oh.
Everybody's wearing one. I went to set that way, everybody on set had the same materials. We rehearsed with the gear on. So there's a certain amount of PPE that's going on out there. And it feels awkward, but then once you get to, as George and Rhavynn and Mark know, once you start to look into the actor's eyes, here's the key back to Mark and talking about the eyes. The interaction and the sharing of the acting process begins when you communicate and when you begin to see and listen to the other actor. And in spite of the protocols, you still natively, if you're an artist, go back to that moment that made you an artist to begin with, and you find a way. Just as quickly as we were about to shoot, a PA comes over with a private bag with my name on it. Only I can reach in it, only I can put things in it, only I can take things out. They open it up, shield goes off, mask goes off, we shoot, cut, here it comes again, it's back on.
So let me ask you really quick, do you feel that interfered with your process? Did it hurt you any? Or were you able to rock and roll like you normally would?
It didn't hurt the process for me. I mean, there's an adjustment just because it doesn't feel quite so natural, but you get over that very quickly because then you go back to your native training and your experience. And this is why, from a casting perspective, they want people who have been there and delivered. That doesn't mean you can't find new people who are not innately capable of doing this thing and making the adjustments. But I didn't think it interfered. I knew it was for my safety. I knew it was for the safety of those around me. And in the end, we were still trying to make a product that we could be proud of and that the public would want to see. And so from that perspective, I think all of our protocol, and by the way, that's the same protocols we're working with that SAG-AFTRA negotiated with the AMPTP, including Teamsters, DGA, WG, you know, everybody right on down the line, IA. They work. And I would only say this to all actors, don't be intimidated by it. Remember why you're there and what you do, and you'll make it. It works just fine.
That's great, thanks.
It's amazing you say that because before I go to set, I have to obviously get tested, you know. So I find myself going to set less and less now. Like 48 hours I have to get tested to make sure, you know, because they're doing quicker tests, you know, that you're COVID free. And the other thing is nowadays, there is no last minute casting. Oh, I need this person, which I'm grateful for, but there is no more last minute casting because especially if you want to stunt cast, you can make a cameo with somebody who's in LA. That's no longer happening because now the people that you are considering, they have to be quarantined within a certain amount of time and consistently tested. That just goes to show you that when somebody loves what they do, they're going to continue to love it. Rick is a professional. Clayton, you're a professional. Once you love what you do, you know, like Mark's hat says, love anyway. You love what you do. So you're going to go and you're going to make it happen because it is what you love doing. And for the actors who are consistently doing that, I applaud them. It is not an easy thing, constantly getting that swab in your nose. I've had it done. I don't like it. I tell you, I do not like it. But I do want to go to set sometimes and congratulate the actors who got booked. Now, when I get to set, I'm a little afraid. I'll be honest with you, you know, because everybody, hey man, hey, you know, but you want to go there and you want to show everybody love. You want the people to say, hey, we're all in this together. There's no, it's you, it's us, you know, because this industry, it is us. There's no singling out, we're a family. And I love the fact that every production is taking necessary steps to make sure that everybody's safe. That's a very beautiful thing.
Great, thank you, George. Let's use
Clayton, I would just add that. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be cutting you off.
Please, Mark.
But we started network series on Friday of this past week, and literally our producer just wrote our office saying, would you please write all of the agents again and all of the actors again that we've booked for these first 2 episodes, making it so clear to them what is expected. And what's expected is if you're going to work on a Friday, then what's expected is you're going to go on a Tuesday to get tested. Some of these productions, the one that Rick worked on, they sent a FedEx overnight self-testing kit, which you then turned around and sent back out, fully paid for, and they had an instantaneous response. The network show I'm on right now has one doctor, one hospital, one nurse, one central location where all testing is done. So if the actor lives in Fayetteville and that location happens to be in Covington, Georgia, it's going to take you an hour to go over there, an hour to get tested, and an hour to get back. So there has been a $250 a day arrangement on any day that you're being tested, that you are not on set, pre-testing, so to speak. You're getting paid for that time, in a sense, for that fee. Not necessarily reimbursed, and your work day does not actually start on that day. You need to be clear about that. But then if you happen to work on the show for 3 days, then you will be tested on the third day, and then you'll be tested 3 days after that, and you'll be tested 3 days after that, because once you're working, I think the other cautionary tale is everybody doesn't have the luxury that Tyler has and that they've created there. It's an incredible thing. But the fact is, the series show that we're doing is actors that live all around Atlanta, and they go home at night and they go out to dinner, or they go, they're living their normal everyday lives. We hope that they are wearing masks and they're being protective everywhere they go, but we can't control that time and what they're doing. But I think every actor really needs to realize that the only way that Ric felt safe and comfortable to release himself in the moment that he was there to do his performance is because all the safety protocols around him made him feel safe. At the moment that he took all that off, and now all the extras and everybody that are in the room, he's not concerned of whether or not that extra might have it or that might, he is fully comfortable and free to be able to be himself and create these moments that he's talking about. But adding to what George said, the fact is we are all in this together. And if you really are serious about this, which I'm assuming if you're all union members, wherever you are in America or in other countries listening in, if you're putting yourself up for this work, then think about that 24 hours a day, because what you're doing at home and where you're going and all the different places you're going is jeopardizing a lot more people than just your own family. It's potentially jeopardizing your job or jeopardizing other people that you're going to now potentially be working with over the next 2 or 3, 4 weeks.
And if I could just add, there's a tacit agreement between the production and the performers that while I may feel safe on the set, it's my obligation to continue safe practices when I'm away from the set and over the weekend. You may say, hey, I want to go out to dinner, have dinner at home. Whatever you do, if you have to eat dinner in a restaurant, go to an outdoor restaurant, go to a patio. Try to restrict the number of people that you're interacting with, at least for the duration of the time that you're working, because those people are working hard to keep a safe bubble. If you break the bubble, you're the problem. And when Mark says they're doing testing after the fact, this is about contact tracing. Because if we can narrow it down and somebody does, heaven forbid, get exposed and we start to see it, it has to be isolated. And those people then therefore have to be isolated. So once again, as a professional, not just in the performance of your duty and your craft, but in the acknowledgement of humanity to everybody else that you interact with, because we're this huge community, this industry is a huge family. How many times have you gone to and from a set and you went, it's like being with family? Because it is, and we care for one another. So take that extra precaution, extend it into your daily life, at least before, during, and immediately after the time that you're working with these other people.
I think everybody.
These protocols are called the safe way forward, guys. Safe way forward.
Yeah,
Let me jump into some of these specific questions we've gotten from members. Things we've gone over before, but they need to hear. How does an actor tap into the LA, New York, Atlanta market if you're living in another state?
You move to wherever you want to work. That's the bottom line. If you want to work in New York, then move to New York. If you want to work in LA, move to LA. If you want to work in Atlanta, then move to Atlanta. Because that literally is where you live. And particularly with everything you've just heard about COVID, it's becoming more and more challenging, even for production, to bring actors in from LA or from New York into Atlanta. If in fact they can find these actors in Atlanta, that's what they're going to do, unless they have adequate amount of time to be able to work out all the details of getting you tested where you're living and coming. So it's a very difficult, I know that our industry is very much of a carnival type business. So we want to be able to work wherever we want to work. And yes, in a sense, you can do that. But you need to understand there are incredibly talented actors in every one of these markets, and they can sustain their own market. So I think at the end of the day, the answer to that question from my perspective is wherever you want to work, that's where you should move and live. You shouldn't try and work Atlanta living in Los Angeles or vice versa. You shouldn't live in New York and try and work Chicago. If you want to work in Chicago, move to Chicago.
I think it's going to be harder now to do it anyway. I mean, especially with this COVID in place, it's much more difficult now.
And I have some friends who've actually traveled up to Canada to work. And of course, the Canadian protocols are completely different than those in the United States. And I know Gabrielle and Rebecca and the team were constantly busy negotiating, renegotiating safety best practices. And remember, that's our particular view. Theirs is different. There's a local Georgia actor who is from Toronto, and oddly enough, had to fly up to do a movie called The Man from Toronto. But he himself had to be quarantined in a hotel room for 14 days before he could leave the room. Wow. And then they put him in his individual bubble in a sequestered kind of hotel. And that's where he's going to be until he's done. So even traveling out of country, and he had the luxury of being holding citizenship in 2 countries, but not all of us have that opportunity.
Well, then here's a question that goes to what Mark just said. With increasing emphasis on casting from a growing pool of experienced local talent in markets like Atlanta, as production opportunities continue to expand, how does talent relocating to Georgia get on the radar of local casting directors that seem to primarily cast, well, we're primarily casting off tape. Agencies here say they're forced to submit a revolving group of favorites because casting here doesn't typically hold live auditions, which we can't do now, to screen for new talent. Don't take pictures or, and again, you can't hold general meetings. So how do these new people who are coming into the market, how do they make themselves known?
So I think from my standpoint, in terms of how do we make yourself known? How do we find new talent? Most of the time I do post my breakdowns on George Minton Breakdown Services. I do allow actors who don't have representation to submit. So if I do accept submissions through Actors Access, so you can still submit for my projects if you don't have representation yet. Another thing is that I recently, last week, just attended a virtual showcase. So there are still acting classes, acting programs that are doing virtual showcases, which allow us to still scout, to still find new talent, even though we're not having live auditions or we're not having meetings. So if you can find a program that does some sort of virtual showcase, I've submitted to it. I've had some of my associates who've attended some showcases, so that could be a great opportunity for you to still be seen in this time.
I think the only thing that's changed is that we're just doing everything virtually right now.
Right.
So, I mean.
So how would they get them to you, George? How would they get in front of you?
The same way they have been getting in front of us. Like Rhavynn said, we're still doing virtual showcases. We're still submitting, allowing people who aren't represented to submit to us. And it's just a matter of them doing the legwork. Sometimes you got to do the homework. I mean, you got to know who the producers are. We have to know who the producers are out there, right? We have to know who the actors are out there. So as an actor, I feel like they should know who the casting directors are out there, what casting companies are out there. Send them an email, send them a postcard. So it's still the same way. It's still the same process. It's just the only thing that we're just not seeing in person. An actor texted me the other day, hey, I want to take you to lunch. Hey, I'm not going, So, I mean, in a nice way, but I think it's still the same process. I think people are starting to think differently and like, oh my God, well, how do I get in front? It's the same way. It's just being done virtually now. You know, everything, we're still in our office. We're still in our office working. It's just that we're not in a physical office working. We're doing everything virtually.
Mark, you have something to add to that?
It is a problem, you know, because I am meeting new incredible talent that's moved here from LA after being there 20 years, and they cannot get representation here because the agencies are full. They have the groups of numbers of people in a particular age group, and they're just saying, if I add one more in that age group, it's just, you know, I got to say we're a work in progress. And I agree with everything Rhavynn and George just said. Showcases we do, we took time during May and June just to do Zoom calls with every agency in the market, having them put 20 or 30 of their actors into a Zoom room for us to meet and get to talk to of talent that we had never met before, that they've been submitting to us, but we've never actually met. They've never met us, we'd never met them. So we went through several hundred actors in May and June out of our office, just getting to know actors that have moved to the market, that have picked up representation. But it is still a problem that I'm still trying to figure out. And I think George and Rhavynn and I, on another occasion or with the other casting directors in the market, should genuinely get together and discuss this, because when I have an actor moving in that is solid, we do want them to have representation. It does make our job easier. I cannot keep up with the individual name of an actor month after month, year after year. The representation process helps us successfully do what we do as efficiently as we have to do it. And so anyway, we're still trying to work out what's the best way to recommend a particular actor to particular agencies, or how, you know, and maybe this is where the union could put their heads together as well and begin to dialogue. How do we help our members that come into the market get plugged in to the agencies and have legitimate representation? It is a problem.
You know,
I appreciate the question. I really appreciate the question, because it's a real problem. Sorry, George, go ahead.
No. It's amazing you say that, because I had an agent who reached out to me and they wanted my thoughts on an actor that I saw during a showcase, right? And I said, I gave them my honest opinion, and they brought the person on board. I thought that was phenomenal. They actually signed the person on, and I pray that we see them soon. That you guys see them soon. But yeah, I agree with you. There should be a process in place, because what I don't like is when the agents submit the same person over and over and over, or they'll just submit their entire roster. Like, okay, then at the end of the day, I can't do business like that, because I get you want your people to be seen, but they have to at least match the role.
Thank you. President Carteris, Gabrielle, do we have any questions there that you think stand out that you want to throw in here now?
There are a couple of great questions. First of all, I just have to say this has been a great panel. And Clayton, you've done a wonderful job. It's riveting to hear everybody talk. I have to say, Atlanta, like other locals, because we're seeing so much work traveling around, these are the questions people have. It's really, the information is invaluable. One of the questions I got actually is from somebody from New Orleans. She says, before the pandemic, some series in New Orleans would not allow actors who had appeared on a show to play a different character in a later season. Now that shows wish to limit travel, regional actors who can work local hire or modified local hire are able to audition for parts on shows they appeared on before. Is this case true in Atlanta as well?
For us, not yet. So for us, if you have booked a show, or you've been established as a character on a previous episode, we are still, you can be considered for a different show, but not the same show. I will say we are putting a lot of emphasis due to COVID on definitely making sure we have actors that are physically in the Atlanta area. But for us, we are still abiding by, if you've been booked on a show, you can't come on again on the same show as a different character.
Thank you. I think this is a good one, actually. Thank you for answering that. Rebecca, this is a good question for you, actually. How have COVID protocols or SAG-AFTRA guidelines impacted smaller productions with the additional personnel and associated costs? As more is discovered regarding the virus, more infections or fewer serious cases, will SAG-AFTRA be proactive in loosening restrictions to enable smaller productions to operate under a SAG-AFTRA contract?
That is a great question. And I think the most important thing for people to think about is safety is going to be safety regardless of what tier of production, regardless if it's a one-day shoot, regardless whether it's a movie, whatever it is, that the priority for the union, and I think for all of our members and for production as well, is that people be safe. So safety is not something that you can have a different opinion because of the budget level. We have done things in our lower budget contracts that when people are putting in their budget for that they're able to delineate all of the costs that are things that are new costs due to safety so that it doesn't inadvertently kick them up to a higher budget level. So, you know, the cost for your ordinary and necessary cleaning that would have been part of your budget, that is still part of your budget, but the cost for the tests, for your COVID compliance monitor, all those kinds of things in the mix, those kinds of things can be delineated so that it isn't moving you to a different level. And I think that that's really an important accommodation that we of SAG-AFTRA has made, because we want people to do things in the safest possible way. But we have always said from the beginning of this process that SAG-AFTRA as a leadership team, as an organization, and this is true everywhere around the country, is that we're going to follow the science, and that science has been our #1 priority. And in a world where that can be a little topsy-turvy for everyone, you know, if you keep going back to the science, you actually do have the answers to what needs to happen in any given moment. The protocols were designed for the fact that there would be, in fact, you know, infection rates would move around the country, would go up and down. We've actually seen that happen. And the protocols are important because this is a disease that is proven that people can carry it being asymptomatic. So you may feel like in a given moment that your rate of infection is quite lower, but the reality of this is people can transfer this disease at a point where they're still asymptomatic. So that's why the protocols are so important, because that ability to protect people really needs to be in place, even when you might feel like, you know, New York was doing a lot better, for an example, for a good period of time. And now we've got certain hot spots, and that's going to continue to happen in this country until we really get this disease managed and under control, and until such time as there's a safe and reliable vaccine. So that has been sort of our process and our thinking behind it. So it's very important that people be safe, no matter whether it's the biggest budget production ever or just a tiny production. We really have to put safety first.
And also with the safety protocols put in place, it allows us to hopefully keep the industry open, right? Because otherwise it's shutting down, opening, which is actually more cost prohibitive, much more painful, and actually damaging to the industry. So these protocols actually will help us to continue and go into the workplace and continue working. Thank you for that, Rebecca. Do you watch, and this is for the casting, all you wonderful casting directors here, do you watch all taped auditions that are submitted, the ones that you actually requested, even after you believe you found the right actor for the role? It's an interesting question.
Answer is yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
If we've requested them, then we are serious about them. And even if they're not right for that role in that episode, generally there's a lot more episodes coming. So you're always thinking ahead, you know, even when you're watching in particular.
Thank you. That's actually a great piece of information.
Yeah.
Hello, Mark, glad to see you. My question is, what does the future hold for older males in this changing industry? And what is the best way to approach auditions in this climate?
Here,
Is that for Mark? So we're gonna let Mark answer that? Since
Yeah, I'm the old man in the room. I face the same dilemma because look at the youthful beauty of my two competitors on this same Zoom call. No, the beauty
he called
is,
you out.
Yeah.
Mark
Yes,
froze.
please, Mark, speak to old men, please.
He actually froze. His screen froze up. So
I think he froze.
go ahead. Good. Try to pick up on that, George.
Please.
Rhavynn.
Me with the so I feel like, and George or Mark or Rick, you guys can fill in, when it comes to older actors, we for us, not much has changed in the midst of this time. We still have plenty of roles for actors of all ages. I will say we have had one or two actors that just felt that either because of age or because of pre-existing health conditions, they just didn't feel comfortable. Actors that we cast didn't feel comfortable with, you know, participating or being in quarantine, and we were completely fine with that. And again, like, that's the actor's choice. We want to make sure that they feel comfortable. But for us, not much has changed for us.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for us, it's still the same. But what we have had happen is that some with the older actors, they say they're not, like for a series, they say they don't want to come back because of the fear. And unfortunately, rewrites had to be done. But it's definitely on the individual if they want to work. But those are some of the things that we ran into. But there's still work out there. I don't think anything changes because of age-wise.
I was going to say the beauty of life is that it's all ages and all shapes and sizes and every nationality. And that will never change. So we're telling stories about life. You know, I do The Resident, which is a medical drama. Well, what do you think the first 3 episodes are all about in season 4? I can't give too much away, but our entire conversation has been what's been happening behind the walls in the floors and the emergency rooms of hospitals. Well, they've been the very people group that you're talking about that we had greater concerns about are the very people group that we have to cast to bring in to represent real and everyday life. So I think work is always going to be available for all ages because that's life.
Yeah, that's great. I think members needed to hear that. So thank you. Though our industry is picking up, many members must retain other employment. If you wear a mask during required quarantine before you shoot, whether in the bubble or on set or at home in another city, can you work your other job or must you give it up?
Be a little more specific. When you say other job, is it
I guess
9 to 5 or another?
That's what it sounds like. I'm not.
I think this is more, George, about people to sustain your lifestyle. Of course, you know, acting can be sporadic as far as getting booked gigs. And so the great problem with this profession is that many of us have had to have other jobs to sustain a livelihood. And so that if you're an essential worker and you're working in that environment, I don't think it eliminates you as long as you're using, once again, safe and best practices and your company is doing that. I don't think that ought to eliminate you from the mix. Just be concerned and cautious within that environment so you don't bring one to the other.
Great. Here's the last question that I have is regarding the perceived credibility of on-screen credits opposed to off-screen credits such as ADR, especially when those ADR credits and productions are aligned with some of the most respected in the industry. How do casting directors look at those credits when evaluating an actor for an on-camera role they are casting? Is that clear? So people who do ADR, people want to know if they have credits outside of just being on camera and you hear their work. Is that something?
Well, we don't alienate anyone or not allow anyone to audition because of it. I mean, if the talent, again, is giving somebody an opportunity to showcase what they're capable of doing. So I don't think one should have anything to do with the other. It won't hinder the person, in my opinion.
Right. Great. Clayton, that's all I have.
That's wonderful. This was just a tremendous panel. Thank you guys so very, very much. Once again, you've given so much to our local, to our industry, to union members, and now you've given it to union members across the country. Thank you all so much. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for being here. Really, you have been a great panel. Clayton, again, great moderator. Wonderful. And thank you everybody for joining the PTOE, the President's Task Force on Education Outreach. It's was really enlightening. I hope that you'll stay connected with us and watch future presentations that we have. But with that, stay safe and we will see you later.
Take care.
Stay connected.